The interstellar spacecraft Avalon is seen gliding through space on its journey to the colony world, Homestead 2. The ship is operating on autopilot, with all its quarters deserted. On board, 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers remain in hibernation. Suddenly, the ship enters an asteroid belt, causing its shields to weaken. Power is quickly rerouted to reinforce the main shield, but the vessel is now heading straight toward a massive asteroid. In a flash, the asteroid strikes the ship, triggering a series of critical malfunctions. As the ship initiates its self-repair protocols, one of the hibernation pods unexpectedly activates. The passenger inside, Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, is awakened. His pod opens, and an automated system guides him through the process, informing him that he has been in suspended animation for 120 years. He learns that the ship is just 4 months away from reaching its destination, Homestead 2, and is assured he can spend the remaining time enjoying the vessel's many luxurious amenities. Jim is given instructions regarding his ID band, his assigned cabin, and the key activities he'll be involved in before arriving on the planet. Feeling a mix of excitement and nerves about meeting others on the ship, he gets ready, steps out of his cabin, and walks into an automated classroom designed for a full learning group. Jim appears slightly uneasy as the hologram begins detailing the state of Earth, describing it as overcrowded, expensive, and not worth the hype. It instructs him to save any questions until the end of the lesson, but Jim keeps interrupting, repeatedly asking why he's the only person around. When he notices that the hologram can't respond to his concerns, he sets off to look for other people. He arrives at the ship's main concourse, but it's completely empty. An automated information desk greets him and offers assistance. Jim asks to speak with a real person, and the system directs him to a steward. When he gets there, he finds no one present either. He then requests to see the captain. Reaching the bridge, he realizes he doesn't have clearance to enter, but through the window, he can see that none of the main crew has awakened either. Jim finally arrives at the observatory and discovers that the ship is still 90 years away from reaching Homestead 2. Realizing he has awakened far too early, he hurries back to the concourse and sends a message to Earth, seeking guidance on what to do next, as he has no idea how to return to hibernation. The communication system notifies him that receiving a reply to the expensive call to Earth would take around 55 years. Jim is heartbroken. He wanders around and comes across the ship's bar, where he notices someone else there. While talking to the bartender, he senses something unusual about him. When the bartender goes to pour a drink, Jim suddenly realizes he's an android named Arthur. Curious, Jim tries to get more information from him, but struggles to even explain how it's possible that he's awake so early. The next day, Jim wakes up in his cabin and heads to the cantina, only to discover that most of the menu items are exclusive to gold-class passengers. Settling for a plain coffee, he starts thinking about how to repair his hibernation pod. After gathering all the necessary tools, he manages to get the system running and climbs inside the chamber, but nothing happens. Next, he tries using the tools he discovered to access the crew's hibernation chambers, but that fails as well. Minor malfunctions begin to occur throughout the ship. Jim repeatedly visits the bar, not just to drink, but to talk with Arthur. The android offers some advice that ultimately persuades Jim to break into one of the gold-class rooms and start enjoying himself on the ship. Jim explores every restaurant, plays all the games, and tests out the entertainment system. But as time goes on, the loneliness sinks in deeper, making him feel even more miserable. One day, while drunk, he wanders through the area with the hibernation pods and eventually stumbles into an airlock containing spacesuits for spacewalks. Jim puts on a suit, steps into the airlock, pulls the lever, and presses the button to open the outer door. As he floats outside the ship, he's captivated by the breathtaking view, fully aware that he is the only conscious human experiencing that moment. Jim disengages the magnets on his boots and drifts weightlessly into space, overwhelmed by despair. After a while, he returns to the ship, removes his suit, and heads back to the airlock, this time without any protection. As he grips the lever, prepared to end everything, a sudden change of heart stops him. He rushes back inside, only to slip on a bottle as he enters. Jim gets up and is immediately captivated by a woman named Aurora in one of the pods. Curious, he looks up her profile in the passenger directory and listens to her interview, growing increasingly fascinated by her. Later, he's shown sitting beside her pod, still engrossed in her recordings. Back at the bar, he's reading some of her writing and discussing it with Arthur. He becomes fixated on the irony of his situation, how he left Earth in search of a better life on another planet, woke up too soon and never made it, then met the perfect woman, only to realize she's now unattainable. Jim can't stop thinking about her and begins to consider waking her up as well. He discusses the dilemma with the android but can't quite grasp the problem. If he wakes her up for his own sake, he would be condemning her to stay with him and eventually die on the ship. At first, Jim decides not to, but as time passes, he can't shake the thought. Eventually, he changes his mind. He approaches her pod and successfully activates it. As she begins to wake and experience the same process he went through, he quietly hides and returns to his room. A short while later, he heads to the main concourse, hoping to spot her, and there she is, looking just as lost as he had been a year earlier. Jim explains that they're the only ones awake and leads her to the observatory. He then confides that he's unable to reach either the crew or the ship's main command centers. Aurora panics and insists on getting back into her pod. But when they reach it, Jim tells her there's no special equipment on the ship to put them back into hibernation, making it clear that they're stuck. They return to the concourse, and he suggests she should get some rest, considering she just emerged from hibernation. She feels pity for him, knowing he's had to spend over a year alone on the ship. Jim returns to the bar, burdened with regret over his actions. He quietly asks Arthur to keep it a secret that he was the one who woke Aurora. The following morning, Aurora wakes up and heads to the concourse. She approaches the automated information desk to inquire about the hibernation pods. Jim soon joins her there, and together they go to have breakfast. As they depart, the info desk suddenly malfunctions. In the cantina, Aurora notices that Jim has been having the same breakfast for over a year, so she surprises him with one of the gold-class menus. They discuss the chances of repairing the pods, but unlike Jim, Aurora isn't ready to lose hope. She rummages through the infirmary, pores over research documents, and finally makes her way to the crew's hibernation quarters, attempting to pry the doors open. Jim notices more and more malfunctions occurring throughout the ship. After some time, Aurora reflects sadly on her life aboard the Avalon. She spends her days writing, jogging around the ship, and swimming in the pool, gradually becoming increasingly aware of her circumstances. One day, she visits the cantina to interview Jim, hoping his story might be compelling. When she asks why he chose to immigrate to the colony, Jim initially recites the company's slogans but then opens up, explaining that he hopes to find a chance to become somebody and build a life for himself on the new world. Later, they find themselves in the observatory, where Aurora finally reveals her true reason for being on the ship. Unlike the other passengers, she holds a round-trip ticket. Her plan is to spend a year living on Homestead 2 and then return to Earth, becoming the first journalist to do so and writing the greatest story ever told. Aurora gradually starts to lose hope of finding a solution to their predicament, but Jim comes up with a way to lift her spirits. He takes her dancing, to the cinema, and then to the basketball court. Finally, he brings her to a bar to introduce her to Arthur. For a while, she feels relaxed, until reality of their situation comes crashing back. Meanwhile, Jim is left alone with the android, burdened with guilt over what he's done to her. Soon after, he's seen working on a small project, and at the same time, Aurora enters the observatory to discover a miniature model of the Chrysler building that he has crafted for her. Sometime later, they go on a date at the bar. Over dinner, they share stories about their lives. Aurora opens up, revealing that her father passed away when she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim escorts Aurora to the airlock, where they suit up in their spacesuits. Together, they step outside for a spacewalk. For the first time, Jim has someone to share the awe-inspiring experience with. He turns off the magnets on their boots, and they drift freely together in the vastness of space. When they return inside, they immediately share a kiss, then retreat to Jim's cabin where they spend the night together. Soon, they begin living as a couple. Aurora moves into his cabin and starts writing about her life aboard the ship. They jog, eat, and sleep together, embracing their new life side by side. Jim continues his exploration of the ship and discovers the hydroponics bay, where he picks some flowers for Aurora. One day, as the ship drifts past a red giant star, they head to the observatory to admire the spectacular sight. Later, to celebrate Aurora's birthday, they spend the evening in one of the ship's many restaurants before moving on to the bar. While Aurora chats with Arthur, Jim slips away to the washroom to get ready, carefully preparing the ring he crafted for her. The android reveals to Aurora that Jim deliberately woke her up, unaware that he was supposed to keep it a secret. Suddenly, Jim returns, and Aurora confronts him in utter disbelief. Furious and panicked, she storms away. When Jim returns to his cabin, he finds all her belongings gone. The next day, he encounters her in the cantina, But the moment he tries to speak, she flees. Aurora is desperate. One night, she storms into Jim's cabin, punching and kicking him with the intent to kill. As she continues to avoid him, Jim reaches out over the comm, trying to apologize and explain himself. He confesses that he has fallen in love with her, but Aurora remains unmoved. She cannot forgive him for stealing her life. Later that night, while Jim is in his cabin, another malfunction occurs. The ship experiences a critical system failure, causing the main command to shut down. Afterwards, when Jim steps into the elevator, it malfunctions as well. Aurora enters the main concourse and notices that Jim has planted a tree there. She then heads to the cantina, where the food dispenser is also malfunctioning. Suddenly, they both hear the deck chief's voice over the comms, demanding to know who planted the tree. They rush back to the concourse and find Gus Mancuso standing by Jim's tree. After introducing themselves, they explain the situation to the chief, who is baffled about how 3 pods could have failed. Mancuso leads them to the bridge and discovers something is wrong with the ship, but the system information needs to be verified manually. As they leave the bridge, a robot nearly crashes down on them, prompting both to tell Mancuso that malfunctions are becoming increasingly common throughout the ship. Mancuso responds that such issues shouldn't be happening and proceeds to demonstrate how to gather diagnostic data. While he's inspecting the hibernation pods, Jim arrives and reveals what he discovered about Aurora's pod. Disturbed by Jim's actions, Mancuso is clearly unsettled. Later, he reviews the collected data on the bridge when Aurora approaches to discuss the situation with her pod. He listens but admits there's nothing he can do to change what's been done. Jim then enters, carrying the 16th malfunctioning robot. Mancuso, beginning to show signs of hibernation sickness, decides to rest. But as he leaves, he suddenly coughs up blood. That night, unable to sleep, Aurora heads to the pool for a swim. Suddenly, gravity fails throughout the ship, and the water lifts around her, trapping her as she begins to drown. Just in time, the gravity drive resets, and she narrowly escapes with her life. She and Jim bump into each other as they both rush off to find Mancuso. The three regroup at the bridge, piecing together the mystery of the ship's malfunction. Mancuso deduces that a critical system failure occurred 2 years earlier, triggering the chain of problems. They realize something critical has failed, and unless it's fixed, the entire ship, already straining to compensate, will be left helpless and adrift. As they go to investigate, Mancuso suddenly collapses. Jim and Aurora rush him to the infirmary, but the prognosis is grim. He's dying, and there's no treatment that can help or delay the inevitable. Later, the three gather in the observatory. Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, urges them to save the ship, and then passes away. Just then, the lights flash red and the ship begins to shudder violently. Jim calls on Aurora to assist him, and they race toward engineering. On the way, a failure occurs in the gravity drive, and immediately after, Arthur begins malfunctioning. Jim has no choice but to deactivate him. They finally reach the engineering section and begin searching for the root of the problem. They trace it to the power plant. As they open the hatch to investigate, a sudden breach sucks Aurora inside. An asteroid impact has ruptured the hull in that sector. Jim is pulled in two, but grabs hold of the hatch as it attempts to seal. Despite the struggle, he gets pulled in as well. Together, they manage to close the breach just in time. Immediately after resolving the initial issue, Jim realizes that the hull has sustained multiple breaches. He and Aurora trace the meteor's trajectory and discover that it has struck the reactor control computer. Believing he can locate replacement components, Jim begins searching. They eventually find the necessary part and install it, but the automatic reactor venting still fails. Attempting to vent it manually also proves unsuccessful. Jim deduces that the only way to cool the reactor is by opening the vent door from outside the ship. Both head to the airlock, and as Jim prepares to go out, he gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet, a sign he may not survive the task. Aurora helps him into the spacesuit, and just before he exits, she pleads with him to return, admitting she can't face life on the ship without him. She returns to the reactor room, where the temperature has reached a critical level. As Jim approaches the vent door from outside, a bolt of energy shoots from the reactor and injures Aurora's arm. Meanwhile, Jim struggles to override the vent mechanism and force it open as the reactor's heat continues to surge. Jim soon realizes that in order to vent the reactor, he'll have to manually hold the door open himself. He shares the risky plan with Aurora. She's against it, fearing for his life, but he insists, it's the only way to save the lives of everyone on board. Despite her hesitation, she follows through and vents the reactor. The plan works, but the reactor's fumes blast Jim away, breaking his tether and causing the pressure in his suit to drop dangerously. He manages to inform Aurora of what happened. Wasting no time, she rushes to grab another suit and attempts to rescue him. As she flies out, her tether falls short, pulling her back. Desperately, she reaches out and just manages to grab hold of Jim's broken tether, pulling him back in. She drags him to the infirmary, but it's too late. Jim appears to be dead. Determined not to lose him, Aurora uses Mancuso's command bracelet to override the medical pod's protocols and initiate emergency resuscitation. The pod automatically begins the revival process, and Jim is brought back to life. Aurora forgives him, overwhelmed with relief. Later, Aurora repairs Arthur, the android, and together, they hold a proper burial in space for Mancuso. Jim then shows her a discovery: he's figured out how to reprogram the medical pod to function as a hibernation chamber. He offers it to Aurora so she can sleep through the rest of the journey and wake up with the rest of the passengers. However, she declines. Aurora chooses to stay awake and live her life with Jim aboard the ship. Eventually, Jim proposes, and they spend their lives together in the solitude of space. 88 years later, the Avalon reaches Homestead 2. As the crew awakens, they find the ship transformed in ways they hadn't expected. Aurora leaves them a message, recounting the beautiful life she and Jim built while the rest of the passengers slept. That's it for today's story. Like, subscribe, and comment your next movie pick. See you in the next one, only on Sci-Fi.